to self, 10 minutes is a really long time. Next time I'll just start 5 minutes before, and we'll go from there. Alright, let's get going. First off, hope everyone's alright, everyone's keeping safe, and while we're off over this time, I figured this would be a good way of learning new skills, sort of sharing things that I've wanted to sort of share, things I've wanted to do for a while, and I thought we'd look at Fusion 360. It's a very accessible bit of software. You can download it free for a trial, and if you're using it just as a sort of hobby sort of side of things, I think it's free for the first year, and it is one of the more affordable versions of software like this, which is an indestructible parametric modeling package, but we'll cover what those terminologies mean. So I've got a little video here. So yeah, I've picked something for us to model. I've been in the film industry. My name's Dan Rutter. I've been in the film industry for the last sort of 3 years as a CAD modeller. We're going to model up this car from Hunt Doherty on ArtStation. Check him out. He's got loads of really cool concepts up there. I hope he doesn't mind me using this as a bit of inspiration. I know it looks scary, but trust me, we're going to break it all down bit by bit. We're not going to do it all today, so don't panic. So let's have a little look. So when I say we're going to break things down, this is our piece of artwork here. Let me just make my brush a little bit smaller. We're going to concentrate on this front wing section. It's nice in our CAD modelling package. We only ever really have to worry about modelling half of a vehicle like this, so instantly half the work, which we're all good for. Within this sort of outline section, we're going to break it down into a few elements. There are lots of little repeats in there, so yeah, hopefully bit by bit it's going to become less scary. So if we open Fusion up, we'll just have a little sort of guide through what we've got going on here. Fusion works through sketches to create a 2D outline mostly. You can do 3D, and we'll be doing that later on in the week when we deal with surfaces, but at the moment we're just going to do 2D outlines, and then we make them 3D by creating either an extrude shapes or revolve shapes, things like that, but everything is based on a 2D outline. It's pretty nicely laid out, Fusion. So the first thing you're going to want to do is create a sketch to make that 2D shape. Then the most common one is extrude or revolve, and then once you've got a shape, then you might want to put a hole in it or do a pattern. So everything kind of works left to right. You know, once you've created a solid, then you start going to your modify sections. You know, do you want to push, pull, maybe change the shape that you've made, or start adding fillets or chamfers? And all of this is incredibly flexible, being able to go back and tweak and change things at a later date, which makes my life much easier and hopefully will make everybody else's. Middle mouse button for most people will be orbit and rotate around. Use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. So based on that, I think we'll get going. So I've got open on another screen, and you could always use your phone, a copy of the image. Always nice to have your reference image within sight, and quite often in our job we get lovely images like this, whereas all we really want is a side view or a top view or something to make our life easier. There's a lot of interpretation that goes on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch. Now this brings up your origins. So this is like the ground plane, mid plane, front plane. So just on the ground plane, I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to do a rectangle. Now doing things are never straightforward. There are many rectangles. So we've got a 2-point rectangle, which is a click and click, and that does corner to corner. What I want to do is delete that, and under create, drop down here, and rectangles, you've got a center rectangle. So I'm just going to do a rectangle that I think is roughly the size of the car, just so when I'm sketching things out, I've got some idea of the size that things are going on. So I'm going to pop that there. Now the shortcut for the dimension key is D, and then you can select on your lines and we can add a dimension. So I reckon this car is probably pretty big, maybe 4 meters, maybe 5 actually. So we'll go 5 meters long, zoom out so things fit. Pretty skinny, maybe take that back down to 3, something along those lines. Once you're in a sketch and you're drawing a sketch, your tools up here will obviously change. So you've now got your drawing lines, rectangles, circles, splines. You can mirror parts of your sketch. We'll deal with this as we go, but at the moment we just want a rectangle. And the thing that trips a lot of people up is once you've finished sketching, you need to click on Finish Sketch, which you can either do down here or up at the top. Now you see we've got our, zoom back out, we've got our controls here, so we can extrude this shape up. So if I just click extrude, I can grab hold of this arrow, and we've created our first kind of object. I reckon that probably looks about the right kind of height actually, so press OK. Yay. Down this left hand side we've got some useful little things. So this will list all of our sketches as we make them, so if we want to refer back to them later we can, and it also lists our bodies, which are the new objects that we create in our sort of scene. So I'm just going to double click on this and call it block, just so I know what it is in the future. And the other thing I can do with this is I can change the opacity of it. Just take it down to like 50%, so I know it's just there as a sort of a reference for what I'm going to be doing. The reason I wanted to draw from the center point is that when we draw half of our car, I can flip it along that original axis, and it just keeps everything nice and central in the scene. Not always the way to work, but it's the way I tend to work. So when we create sketches, click on the button again, it obviously comes up with our 3 origin planes in the middle. Now, as well as sketching onto those, we can actually sketch onto the edges of our box, which is why I like having it as reference. So I'm going to choose this front face. I'll spin round. And I'm just going to start sort of trying to work out this sort of shape at the front here on one side, and see what's going on with that. The other thing I tend to believe in is that sketches should start their life as exactly that. They are sketches. Sometimes you do want to make sure things are all locked off. I think it's probably about that high. Again, you know, I can start adding some dimensions to things. If 500, 600. You can turn the grid snap off, but for what we're doing it's fine at the moment. And then the other thing we do is if you reference your one of your lines at least to a center point, you see these lines now go black, and that means they are fixed in space. So at the moment these blue lines don't know how high they are because they're not referenced to anything, but these lines know that they are exactly 700 from that origin point. So we'll do that one, and we'll add another one here again to the origin point, 300. Now everything is sort of locked off, which is good. We'll finish our sketch and we'll go back to our extrude. Now once we've selected extrude, it's asking us here what profile we're using. It's highlighting all these different things that we could use, but we want to do that shape there. And Fusion tries to help you out. It's sort of like, okay, so you've drawn a shape on a shape, maybe you want to cut a hole. So the operation is set to cut at the moment, and actually we don't. We want a new body. Because once we've made this body, I'm going to turn this block off because it was only there just as a bit of reference for size. Just looking over at my reference images, I think that's probably pretty good. So things you've got here is the start. Do you want it to start where that sketch was drawn, i.e. on that face or profile plane? You can also set it to offset, so we can sort of add a distance in here. And you see it now starts extruding that from 50mm that side. If you want to go 50mm inside, you need to put a minus. But for this moment we'll keep it as a profile. You can also do from object, so the same thing. We can select a face and do an offset from that. So instead of that face, we could choose this face, for example, and now it's going to produce that shape, extrude that shape, but from this surface. I might be going over things a little bit quick, but there is a really cool guy called Lars who does brilliant Fusion tutorials. So yeah, check him out. If not, you know, ask me some questions, and I'll try and cover things a bit better. Once we've created this body, press OK. Now we see we have 2 bodies listed, so we can turn our block off for the minute and just concentrate on this front section of our ship, which is this one just here. So I'm looking at this like full screen snip. Okay, just zoom in. That one. There we go. I'm going to take this piece out as a cut, so we're just concentrating on this piece at the moment and what we imagine is going on under here. So we've got that kind of thing on the go. So we come back into Fusion, we can start a new sketch. I'm going to select this end face, and we can just draw something like that. Again, at this point I am only sketching, I'm not going to worry about fixing those into position just yet. Do the same thing again, do finish sketch, extrude, and this time this time it is smart enough, it does know that we want to cut through that. So we can do that again. So when you're cutting through things, you've got some various options. You can either set a distance, like I want the cut to be this deep, or you can go to object and then it will cut just to that face, and you might be like, well, that's useful, but I don't really know why. This is where the idea of parametric modeling comes in. So if I'm now looking at this and looking at my reference and thinking, do you know what, I think that initial shape should have been slightly deeper. At the bottom of the page here we have our timeline. So this is everything we've done so far. So that was our sketch where we made our first block, where we extruded it up. That was the sketch we used to make our front of this piece, and then the extrude, and then that was our cut, and so on. So any of these you can go back, right click and edit the feature, and I might say, do you know what, this needs to be that long, and then choose OK. Now because we made our cut smart in the terms we said it wanted to go from this face to this face, and we didn't restrain it by just setting a distance. When we change the length of that part, the cut is still smart enough to go from face to face. So if you can reference things to parts of your model, that's always good. But even if we hadn't, we'd go back and edit that, and we'll change it, instead of to object, back to distance, and set it to -1200. We end up with that. Again, it's just that easy to go back and fix it. So find the object that's wrong. I think you can also right click on a face that is part of that object. So these are created by that cut section, and if you right click you can go straight to edit feature in here, and then just manually plonk it through. We're good. So let me call back up my reference image. We've got some little sort of chamfer type details running around the edges here, so we'll just do a sort of a couple of those. So under our modify tool, now that we have an object, we move over to modify. We've got chamfers, and we can just select the edges that we want chamfered. Like so, and then we can either type in a value if we know it, or at this point where we're just sort of experimenting, we can start dragging things around. I feel 100 mil is a bit big, So let's do that as 25, a bit small, 50, yeah, that looks pretty good. So that sort of gives us a little bit of shape and definition to it. Now I'm going to do these little combs at the front here, and we're going to do a pattern array for that. So we're going to draw one of those and then we'll pattern them across to make a full bank of them. So we'll go back to our create a sketch, select on our face here. You can also, so when you select a face, the camera tends to want to rotate round and snap. At least that's how I have it set up, and that is under your display settings, camera, and I tend to do perspective with ortho faces. So when I do select a face, the camera snaps to an orthographic view, and all the time I'm orbiting around, it actually has perspective on, which some people can work with really well. Other people just prefer to have it ortho all the time. I think I play too many video games for that. I'm used to being able to judge distances by perspective. Okay, so we started a sketch on this inside face, and I've just picked up the let's go with the line tool actually, and I'm just going to draw a little shape again, just sketching it sort of, well, it's something, you know, roughly like that. I'll rotate around and go, well, that point is definitely not in the right place. So I can hit escape, and then I can just grab this point, click and drag it around, kind of move things around a little bit, just to get something that we're sort of happy with. If we wanted to be more accurate with these things, I could sort of we start doing relationships with things. So we can go this point up here, and then we hold down shift to select a second point, and that one there. We can say that they are coincident, which means well, no, actually we want to go horizontal vertical. So we say they are always vertical to each other. So if I was now to try and select and move one of those, you see I can't, because they have to stay in a vertical relationship. So you can start sort of locking off your sketches that way. Again, I could sort of add a dimension to here and here, so we can adjust the length of our spike. Double click to edit things, and this is going all over the place. And the reason for that is because this blue line is not it's not locked off. So what I was saying earlier about locking off sketches. So at the moment, by moving this point all the way up here, this is still correct. That point is 200 mil away from this line, but I've not defined a height for it. So we can do that as well. Dimension tool, a height point to there. There we go. And now that point won't move around. Once we've got something we sort of vaguely like, finish the sketch and extrude. We can select two sections here, so we can do this piece and this piece. We can just pull it out slightly. Maybe change that to 20. Now what we want to do here is, because we've drawn something on a face that's of an object that already exists, Fusion is thinking, oh, do you want to join that together? Well, at the minute I don't, because I want to, like I say, do an array pattern, which means we're going to draw one thing and then we're going to tell it to copy it across. So it sort of saves us doing a whole bunch of work. So for that, we would like it to be a new body. So we press OK. Now up here, again, it's always good to sort of label these bodies so you know what they're called. So I'm just going to double check this and call it a fin. What we can do now is, as we move across our create palette, we have this rectangular pattern. So we're going to click on that. Now again, Fusion is really nice in the fact that the top menu, the ribbon menu, is sort of left to right of things you want to do. Whenever you go into an operation, it tends to be top down. It's quite important to kind of read what they say and sort of get an idea. So first thing it's saying here is pattern type faces. Well, I don't want to just move a face of a model. I want to move an entire body. So we'll change that to bodies. Next thing it's asking me to do is to select the object, which we can do. Next thing is the direction. Well, I want to move it in this sort of linear across here. The distance type is the extent. So that is going to, if I've got this right, yeah, the distance is from the first object to the last object in my pattern is the extent. What I can do is change that to be the spacing, so I'm just then defining the distance between each object and the number of objects, but I'm going to keep that as extent. Suppress is a useful one. If you might, for example, get to a reason where you make a whole grill and it has a gap in the grill for something, so you can still use your pattern array, but then you can untick your kind of bodies that are in the pattern. You suppress them, so it's still part of the same feature. It makes it much easier to edit, but you can choose which ones you want to turn on and off. Quantity, good question. Let's have a little look. Looks like quite a few. Again, you know, I'm not sticking to this religiously. I'm going to say there's 12 there. Make it 10. So we'll up that quantity to 10. Distance, we're going to keep moving to there, so that's 380. Another nice thing about programs like this is you don't necessarily have to do the maths in your head. So at the minute I can see that this line is saying it's 400 mil long, and this last grill fin is sort of disappearing, and I know that the width of that is 20 mil. So in here I can type 400 minus 20, and it's smart enough to know that that's 380. No, not exactly the hardest maths in the world, but it helps. So that's kind of our front grille on the go. Now this all looks quite severe, having this sort of sharp point, so I think I'm going to change that. And this is again where this type of modelling comes in handy, is if I wind the tree back to before we patterned it and make changes to this body, when I wind the tree forwards again, that new changed body will be the one that's patterned. So we're going to go back up to our modified tab, and we're going to do a fillet this time. We're just going to make this a little round so it's less lethal, something like that. And we'll also give it a chamfer on that side and that side. I'm not having to hold down shift while selecting these because I'm just in that select mode. And if you have tangent edges ticked, if I select this one line, it will select everything that is tangentially attached, which means it's like a smooth line. If I'd had a fillet on this little top corner up here, then that selection would carry all the way around because it would be one smooth line without a change in the angle. And then I think if we do that at say 5 mil, we get something like that, which kind of looks cool. Happy with that, we press OK. And then if we come down and move our tree to the right, that sort of repatterns that whole thing along, which is kind of cool. Okay, so let's have a look what's next. We've got these sort of triangular wedge parts on the side here. They look kind of cool. Trying to sort of work out roughly what sort of shape we think those are, interpreting this. I think what we'll do is we'll do this triangular shape, we'll copy that over, and then if we go in and fill in this bottom shape, and again we can do all 4 of these just by drawing one of them, and then any changes we want to make, we make to that one, and it will update on all 4 of the others. We go back to creating a sketch. I'm going to create a sketch just on this surface again. with the line tool again. So I'm going to set it in ever so slightly. I'll come down to sort of maybe there, something like that for now. Finish sketch. So I'm literally just sketching at the moment. You know, I'm not entirely sure that's correct, but if I can make something now, we can play about with it once we've got it. So we're going to select that shape. We're going to set it to be a new body. Maybe 50 is a little bit too skinny. Make it say 80. And this is where I want to do an offset. So instead of the extrude starting from the face that I've done the sketch on, I'll set an offset plane and do it at, say, 200, probably minus 200. Yep, so that's going to move it into there. Press OK. So now we've got this shape, we can add some fillets to it, so it looks a bit more like the reference. I'll tell you what, I'm just looking at the amount of bodies that I've got down this side here, and all these fins are all kind of grouped together, or rather not grouped together. I feel they should be. So we can either group them, or what I'm doing is actually, there's no way they'd be unsupported like this. So I'm just going to wind backwards again to before we drew our little wedge on the side. I'm going to make a new sketch on the inside of one of these fins. So we'll call up our create sketch, select the inside face. And it took me a while to find this on Fusion, but I want that information, I want that line of that face in there. So I found under create and then project/include, we can project, and then we can select that face and press OK, and now we have that information in this sketch, which is quite useful. So we move over on our ribbon a little bit. We've got some of the more slightly advanced sort of sketching tools, one of which is the offset tool. So we can select that sketch and then we can drag an offset in. So maybe we'll come in by minus 15, and that's got us weird, got us this new sketch line here, which should be 15 mil in from the outside edge of that face. So we'll finish our sketch, and then we will extrude. We select that face there, we can then drag that through. Again, what we can do is, instead of distance, we can say to object, and we can say to that face there, and we'll set that to join, and then OK. Alright, so now that's all kind of joined together. Now, do I want those fins connected to this? Because at the moment it's just one body. So maybe I'll edit that feature again. So right click on the feature in the feature tree, choose edit feature, and instead of join, we will do a new body. Press OK. And now what we'll do is, under our modify tab, we have here combine, which does pretty much exactly what you think it's going to do. So we can select our wedge, and then we can select all the bodies that we would like to stick to it. And then choose OK. Okay, so now our fins are separate to our outside thing. Now we can move our tree forwards again, and we'll have our little wedge. Now, looking at our reference image, I quite like this sort of pocketing detail it's got on the go. So we can add that. But before we do that, let's make some copies of it, and then we'll play about. So again, we'll do the rectangular pattern tool. It's asking us which, well, pattern type, bodies, the object we want to pattern, our wedge, our direction, so we can select any of these lines that are running in the direction that we want to pattern, are fine to click. And then we can choose our distances. So I only want to do 2 at the moment. And yeah, 125 looks alright. So press OK. And now if I do another rectangular pattern, bodies, and we select both of these, and then our direction, we want 2 of them, we can drag them over as another pair, something like that. So like I say, I like that pocketing information, pocketing detail that's on these things. So we'll do the whole, just wind back our patterns. We've just got one of them left. We're going to start create sketch. Create sketch has got to be the button that gets clicked the most, I think, out of anything. I'm going to grab this information again. So we go on to create, project include, and project. Select that face and then OK. And then I'm going to offset that, and this is going to be the depth of those little pockets. So I don't think they need to be too deep. Maybe do 6 mil, something like that. And then what I want to do is I want to divide this space up. So at the moment, this, when I hover over it, it selects this the entire border around it, and I just want pieces of it. So I can kind of just draw some lines to slice this up a little bit. So we go from there to there. And now if I hover over, you see it's selecting just these pieces. Call up that image again. So that's going to be this pocket detail down here. And there's a bit of pocket detail at the top. So let's add another line, say from about there. Now when you start drawing lines, if you hover over different lines, it snaps. So at the minute this is perpendicular to that outside edge, which is going to be useful. So I'll pop that there. I can always hit escape to come out of that and use our dimension tool to specify a distance for that. 45 mil. And I'm going to do another one down here. So we'll click on that outside edge, hover over the line, and then round, and it snaps to there like that. And we'll do again another distance. Say 45 again. So the only thing now is that if I wanted to pocket this part up here, it's still selecting all round the back and round the bottom, and not necessarily what I want. So under modify, we do have things like the ability to trim sketch lines and to extend sketch lines. So I'm going to choose extend. And if I hover over, you get this little sort of red line that pops up, which is like a little preview of where that line is going to extend to. So I'm just going to click that and do the same down here, like so. So that should be our sketches all kind of done. So we can finish the sketch. And now if we do our trusty extrude, and we want to extrude that shape. No, we don't. We want to extrude that part, and that part, and that part. want those to be cuts. Now again, these are cutting from the surface we drew them on, and actually I want a little bit of an edge, so that's where we can use our offset. We'll set that offset to be, say, 12, minus 12, if we want to go that way. And I can either make a guess or type in if I can't remember how wide I made these. So instead of extent, we'll change that to object, and we'll select this back face. And then this also gives us an option of an offset, which is useful. So I know I did 12 mil from one side, so I should probably do 12 mil on the other side. Minus 12. There we go. So that gives us a sort of a little bit of detail in there. Still looks fairly basic. So this is where fillets can come in. So we can select all of these corners. Again, I'm not holding down shift or anything, I'm literally just clicking and it's adding them to the number of edges. 5, 6. Again, we can just drag that, just add a nice little round to it. Something like that. And then if we wanted to make it look even spiffier, we can do a chamfer. We do the same thing. So we've got our tangent edge, so just by selecting one of these edges, because they're a nice smooth group, we can quite easily select those, and we'll just add a little let's go 5 mil, something like that. Now if we move our tree forwards again, we can re-pattern those newly adjusted components, and they run through here like that. Let's just see if we've got any questions in the chat. Nope. Hello Jason. So let's have a little look again at our image. Ooh, wrong image, there we go, that one. So there's a sort of a block shape that's kind of joining those together. So again, this is where a lot of interpretation comes in. You can look at a piece of concept art and think, oh, that's amazing, and then when you start looking at it, it's all just a little bit dark. So it tends to be up to CAD modelers and designers to interpret that and see what's going to work. So I'm thinking actually maybe this wall here is a little bit too thick. So I might go right the way back to our first sketch here, and we're going to edit that sketch. So instead of making this 600 wide, I'm going to make that 550. I'm just going to bring it in a little bit. Okay, looks a bit better. So now these are all floating. That's fine. We can go back to the sketch where we made those. Edit the sketch. And we can move this down. Now we can play around. Something like that. Finish sketch. Now we go, it's broken everything. And we've highlighted some things here, so if something is red, it means there is something very wrong, and if it's yellow, there's something maybe a little bit wrong, which is fine. So the red is probably saying that it can't find the information to apply that feature to. So it's fine, don't panic. Rule number 1, just wind back through the tree until we find out what went wrong. So okay, so that looks fine. So it must be whatever this feature here, our cut, has done. So that's the sketch that was relying on that. So we can edit that sketch and we can come in and see what's going on. Okay, so this looks simple enough. It's offset to an outside edge, not an inside edge. So at the moment it's pretty much selecting everything in here as opposed to where we had our original lines. So that's going to be one of the reasons why you do want to go back and start locking off sketches at certain points, but because you can easily go back and change these things, it's not a massive deal. So what we're going to do is we're going to select some of these lines and we're just going to delete them out like so, and that one, and then we can call up our offset tool and we'll just put that back the correct way, which was -6. And you can see these are our lines that were dividing things up, and you know that should be this side of the line. So again, we can just do our modify, extend, we'll just ping those back where they should be. That one looks fine. Extend that one and extend that one. Okay, what we can do, go back and trim, and we'll just trim off these excess lines, make it all a little bit neater. Put our dimensions back in. That's already got one. Okay, finish sketch. Rotate around and go, oh, it's still not right. Well, that's because although we've changed our sketch, our cut feature doesn't know what those new areas are. So that's fine. We can come back in here. Well, we've got our profile says 8 selected. Well, we'll just clear that and we'll say, look, we want to do that piece, that piece, and that piece. Okay. Knock forwards one, and then suddenly our fillets are able to recognize where they're going, and our chamfer knows what's happening, and then we can pattern that across. So this one's weird now and it's gone yellow, so that's fine. Get rid of that. Edit the feature. So bodies, it's only got one selected, so that's what that issue is. So we just select our other body, direction, that direction, and then OK. And we're back to where we were, and everything's happy and Harry and good. So let's try and get cracking on sorting out the back of this. So this is all kind of coming into a point. You've got to imagine, if you will, that this is forming some shape underneath here. I'm imagining this to be its own sort of separate piece that we're going to do tomorrow. This piece here comes across here like that. So what we could do with is having a decent back to our green shape here, so it's not just open. We can close that up, and then we might close up this front and just add a few little details in there. So I'll tell you what, that chamfer, now that we've made that wall thinner, that chamfer looks like it's too big. So if we right click on the face of that chamfer and go to edit feature, we can just change that. We'll take that down to 30. There we go. This is what's really nice about this. So if you were modelling in the likes of Rhino or 3D Studio Max, and you'd modelled something, and then somebody, your boss usually, comes in and says, that's nice, but can you change this or can you tweak that? It can be quite tricky. Whereas in here it's much easier to be able to go back and change those measurements and refine things. So if you're getting something CNC'd, like these chamfers for example, and you speak to the company and they say, oh, we don't have a cutter of that radius, we can go in and go, okay, well, if they don't have a, I can't remember what size we made those now, but if they don't have a 10mm cutter, we can edit that, edit feature, and maybe it's not, maybe they've only got a 12mm cutter, so we can change that to 12mm, and then that's it, everything's updated and we're good to go. I say good to go an awful lot, I've decided. Okay, so we'll do a new sketch. We're going to sketch on this front face. we're just going to pretty much just block this up. So we're going to make a little box in here, finish our sketch. We will extrude, select our profile, give it some depth, and we'll do a little offset because we just want it set in. We'll do that at 50 minus 150. Look around, little preview, maybe that's a little bit deep, maybe do 120. For this we will join. Yeah. Okay. Now the inside of this looks a bit blocky and weird, so let's add a little slope, a little angle to that. So we can either go in and add a chamfer, or under modify there is draft. This is quite good, and one I've only recently sort of figured out, was introduced to by Elliot. We do a button a day at work where we try and show each other a new button, a new way of doing something every day, and you know, share the knowledge. So the first thing it's asking for is the plane. Now this is going to be the face that we want to stay fixed. The second thing is the face that we want to move. Then we get this little sort of dial here, and we can just start sort of rotating that round and find an angle that kind of looks cool. Maybe that. And then okay. We can add more fillets. This is something that this software does incredibly well, and it just helps everything just look pretty cool. You can go around and add a small chamfer around this face here. Yeah, nice. Now this vehicle seems to have a distinct lack of sort of headlights and things, so I'm thinking in there is a little prime opportunity to put some sort of headlight detail. So again, we just create a new little sketch. We'll add in a round, maybe let's go rectangular, let's go old school. So this is where the point-to-point rectangle is quite useful, so we can just drag out a rectangle. Maybe it's we have one main light, and we'll do a little indicator, sort of a second light. Hopefully we'll get round to colouring stuff and doing renders at some point, which would be quite exciting. So once we're happy with that, we can finish the sketch. We'll go to extrude, we'll select both of these, we'll give them a distance. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to add a taper. So rather than just extruding them out as flat, if we do a little 30-degree taper, minus 30-degree taper, because we want it to taper inwards, or too harsh, maybe 10, something like that. We can do OK. And these I'm going to do them as new bodies. It's going to be easier for us to apply materials to them later, and then we're just going to fillet all these edges so they are kind of smooth, as if they're sort of vac formed plastic kind of headlight bulbs. Adding some detail in there. Quickly, while we've got about 10 minutes left, we've got another little bit of detail I noticed in here. Down this bottom part there's a couple of pill slots in here, so we can again start a sketch on this face. Now under create, you know, we could do a rectangle and cut it and then add fillets and round it off all that way, but under create here you do have the options for slots, and again lots of different ways. Do we want to draw it from one end to the other end and then give it a width, or do we want to go from a center point? You know, do we want to do a round? All these sort of things. I think for this we just want to go center to center, which is confusing because that is center of one circle at one end of the pill slot to the center of the other circle, as opposed to middle to center. So we'll drag that out and then click and then drag again, and that gives us our sort of width, something like that. We can go in and give this some dimensions. 150, it's fine. Diameter of 18.59 is an odd number. If you can, always try and round your numbers up or down if possible when it comes to doing technical drawings, which is the other big advantage of this type of software over things like 3D Studio Max, is that you might spend a little bit longer working things out now, but once you've done your model it will very easily generate a set of working blueprints, plans and elevations that you can dimension up, you can render, and then they are all linked together. So if you go back and change anything in your model, your sets of plans and elevations will all change and adapt at the same time, save you redoing things, which I'm always a big fan of. We'll make that 15. We'll set that down from the top. 180, there we go, and we'll come in from the edge. I'm just trying to lock this off, so there we go, we've got a full lockdown sketch. Finish our sketch, extrude, just like this, give it a depth, might even give it a little bit of a taper, which should actually be -3, because I want to come inwards. Okay. Adding tapers to things, depending on what process you're modelling this for. If this is going to be something that's going to be pattern made and then moulded and cast out, if you can add slight draft angles and tapers to things, that's really useful. But again, you know, if you start modelling something and then you realise that's the process you're going to go down, you can work your way back through those trees and the feature tree and start adding tapers and fillets and rounding things off and making the model good for the process that it's going to be made in. So again, I think there's a little chamfer around the edge, and we're going to pattern this down, but we're going to pattern it in a different way because we've not made a new body as such. You know, we've cut a hole, so there's no body to select. But again, if we go rectangular pattern, and instead of bodies this time, let's do features, because then we can actually start selecting things from our tree. So I've got here the cut that we made, so I want to pattern that, and then I've got the chamfer we put around the edge, so I'd like to pattern that as well. And then we can choose the direction, so anything that's a sort of a vertical line is good, and we can start dragging those out. You know, maybe we do have 3 on ours instead of 2. Stick with that, press OK. There we go. So once we've got a little bit further, we can come up to our create and do a mirror. We want to mirror bodies. Actually, we could probably mirror components, which would be useful. Objects. So, no, bodies. We're going to mirror all of that. And that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that. Mirror plane. Because we built our original rectangle from that center point, this is the middle of our space. So if I select this line here, which is okay, I That's the sort of the start, the width of our super futuristic Rolls Royce. Yeah, so tomorrow we'll have a look at drawing the top part. I'm also going to cover, see this up here, so we are going to do, bear with me, oop, there we go, we will do this front section here. We'll do some nice cuts to pocket these pieces into, and this is always a fun bit, is this piece here. I think that should be a piece of like a hosing, so we're going to look at creating splines and shapes and then patterning things, but instead of on straight lines we're going to pattern things along a curve. That's me mum calling. Anyway, something like that. So yeah, hopefully join me again tomorrow, again 1 till 2. This video will be saved and available on my channel if you want to recap over anything, and in the meantime, if you've got any questions or queries or anything you want me to cover, drop me a message either on Facebook or on Twitter, or leave a comment under the YouTube video. Enjoy the rest of the day.